All right, thank you so much for being here tonight. Our time is 5:30. I want to welcome you to the Bond Task Force Committee meeting. Due to the fact that we have at least 4 board members, hey Dave, at least 4 board members here, we are considered a quorum. So at this point in time, as president of the BISD Board of Trustees, I call this meeting to order. Dr. Bonewald, item 1, it's all you, my man.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mercer. Thank you all for rejoining us. For those of you who were able to join us at our Monday evening meeting, you may notice I'm wearing a mic right now. Mentioned that we had a number of people interested in serving on the task force who were unable to be here. We had an iPad in the back of the room and had fine video quality, I think, but some struggles with audio quality. And so we're trying something a little different tonight. Ashley here's got her phone set on me. I'm going to try to stay in place. Please don't laugh if I trip over this long wire. But hopefully this will help for those who aren't able to attend in person tonight. So we are at our second task force meeting. Thank you very much for giving us your time again to join us. We've got quite a bit of work ahead of us. For our agenda today, first we're going to start by just reviewing a few task force norms. We've had task forces working for the last 3 years, and one of the things that I failed to cover in that first meeting on Monday were just some sort of expectations in terms of how we're going to work together as a group. We bring task forces together to tackle really complex issues, not things that were easy to solve. If those were easy to solve, we never would have asked you all to come together. And that also likely means that not everyone's going to agree on every point. And so we want to just walk through sort of those norms of how we work together on complex issues. Then we'll jump right back into the work where we left off, discuss the initial 3 options for the potential November bond and/or voter approval tax rate election, or VATRE. Before we jump into that small group work, I'll do just a couple of review slides because I know we threw a lot at you last meeting, those who were here in person and those who watched virtually. And then lastly, if this group comes to consensus during this meeting that we have found an option to pursue, then we'll go to some of the next steps of work. That may happen this meeting, it may not. But if that's the case, we are prepared to then start talking about reviewing priority repair categories, things that were identified in the May bond, and then also potentially discussing VATRE scenarios. So we've got a lot on our plate here. We may not get to all of this tonight. Quickly, just reviewing task force norms. I'll try not to send you extremely long emails. I know I sent you one yesterday sharing some of this information, but I thought it was really important that we all be on the same page. So first off, I'm going to make a commitment as your facilitator of the task force to provide access for all, to all information, all bond and VATRE information. Last thing in the world I want as a facilitator is for someone at this table to have information that they're using to make decisions around what they think the best option is, and others at another table to not have had access to that information. So you should be on our task force group email. I've sent out a few recently. If you have not received those, please touch base with me or Mercedes after the meeting. We'll make sure we update that. But that's where information will be coming. I have no doubt that the information we share is going to generate questions, not just during the meeting, but after the meeting. It's already generated some questions. When I receive those, I will respond to the individual who sends me the question, but I will also share that basic information with the entire group so everyone has access to that information. Similarly, I'm going to ask that we provide access for all in the group. So if you have access to information that you feel is important to be considered as a part of this process, my request for you as a task force member is that you make that information available to me so that I can share it with everyone, so that we're all working with the same information. The second thing we ask that you agree to is to build personal ownership in this process by actively contributing through open and honest dialogue in our small groups, where we will in each meeting spend time in small group conversation, as well as in large group conversations. You are all here because you all have an important voice, and we want you to be involved in owning this process together. And then lastly, I mentioned at the beginning, this is a complex issue. I would love it, but I'll be really surprised if we all agree on everything from the very beginning. So please provide space for all opinions to be respectfully heard. When someone's sharing out with the large group, please refrain from sidebar conversations, because everyone needs the opportunity to share their perspective, and everyone deserves the opportunity to hear others' perspectives. So we're going to ask that we refrain from sidebar when we are doing large group share out. Any questions or concerns about these group norms? Awesome. So we're going to do a brief recap of the potential bond and/or VATRE options for consideration. These are things we discussed toward the end of our last meeting. First, we shared that the information that was used by those who were part of the task force previously, prior to the first bond, that information is not necessarily applicable potentially to the work that we're doing today. Initially, in the first task force, we talked about the fact that there was approximately $99.5 million in bonding capacity within our current INS tax rate without a further increase to the current rate. That number, that capacity, was dependent upon approximately a 30-year amortization or payoff schedule. That 30-year payoff schedule was possible because there was new construction as a part of the bond proposal initially. New Mission Valley, New Stroman, buildings and work that are expected to have a lifespan well beyond 30 years. If the group ends up coming to consensus around work that doesn't include new construction, then it's very unlikely that a 30-year payoff schedule would be even legal by federal guidelines. So if you've come to this with that prior knowledge that we have about $100 million in capacity, that may not be the case. And so this group reviewed what we believe capacity to be based on a 15 or 20-year payoff schedule at a few different tax rates. And I see some folks jotting down, and you're certainly welcome to write, but I've printed these things out. And when we get to our small group work, you will have this data at your table. And just a reminder, you'll see asterisks a lot from me right now. These figures are current projections and will be impacted by factors including our local final assessed taxable property values. We don't receive those final values until late July. It'll also be potentially impacted by interest rate fluctuations. Currently, we're hearing interest rates are starting to move up, and so that will impact capacity. I shared with you on Monday that a part of the federal stimulus to help schools across the nation return it involves ESSER funding, and we talked about the 3 different types of ESSER funding. In fact, we had another community group meeting. A couple people in this room were a part of that meeting last night. We're going 3 for 3 on night meetings. But we went through the community survey around ESSER planning. And so we discussed that these are one-time funds. ESSER funds are not funds that we should expect to continue to receive in the future. These are one-time grants. Oh, no, you're fine. You're fine. Sorry. No, you're fine. Thank you for helping, Mike.
Absolutely. Sorry.
No problem at all. I'm going to take just a second to reiterate the information about ESSER because there are 3 parts, and you may have read or heard some things about ESSER funding. ESSER 1 funding, we did receive some ESSER 1 funds. As a school district, we did receive some ESSER 1 funds, and at the same time, the state of Texas reduced our funding by that equivalent amount. So Victoria ISD, up to this point, has not received any additional funding. We did receive some federal funding, and we received less state funding by that exact same amount. So when I say there's no additional funds to VISD for ESSER 1, that's a fact. It was sort of a shell thing. ESSER 2. ESSER 2 is called ESSER 2, but information is actually coming out about ESSER 2 after ESSER 3. ESSER 2 shows that VISD is scheduled to receive approximately $12 million associated with ESSER 2. There's an asterisk by that because the state will reduce that amount by the enrollment impact we had this past year. The state funded us based on an average of our typical enrollment. Everyone across the nation pretty much had a lower enrollment due to COVID. So the state's going to subtract from this $12 million in funding, we believe about $3 to $4 million. We're not certain, and we won't really know until September. So we expect that we will receive ESSER 2 funding somewhere in the area of $8 to $9 million, but there's still a lot of information left to come to us about that funding and the process to receive that funding. And lastly, ESSER 3. And ESSER 3 is where the largest amount of dollars are. And it's the grant that the committee who met last night, about 40 or 50 people, it's the grant they were discussing, or we were discussing. And 20% of the $28.4 million associated with ESSER 3 that are scheduled for VISD must be spent on student unfinished learning. You can spend more, but you're required to spend at least 20%. And there are a number of allowable categories for expense for these ESSER 3 funds. One of them is air quality. And so that's certainly related to our conversation about facilities and facility needs. Later, I will share with you data around the totality of expected costs just within our HVAC systems across the district. And so that is a potential area that could be leveraged for a portion of these ESSER funds, along with a number of other areas that are identified for appropriate spending of ESSER funds. We talked briefly last meeting about a voter approval tax rate election, VATRE for short. A VATRE involves a school district having an election much like a bond election, where the community can select to raise the maintenance and operations side of the tax rate. VISD, there are 8 what are called golden pennies that are available to all public school districts in Texas. VISD currently has utilization of 5. There are 3 remaining golden pennies that we currently do not have access to as a school district. Those would require voter approval. 1 golden penny is equivalent to $98.56 per weighted average daily attendance. To put it more simply, 1 golden penny is equivalent to approximately $1.65 million per year in funding. 2 golden pennies would be double that amount. 3 golden pennies, approximately triple that amount. Again, those are estimations. Approximately 60% of that funding comes from the state, not locally. Approximately 40% of that golden penny funding comes from local taxpayers. Yes. Yes, sir.
What's the economic impact of a golden penny on a $100,000 house value?
The economic impact of a golden penny.
Because it's a tax. What do you raise a tax on a person per $100,000? Because it's a that.
$10 a year, depending on every $100,000 of taxable value.
$10 on every penny.
Every $100,000
Right.
of taxable value.
Okay.
For a penny. Okay.
Each golden penny adds $10.
I will say for me that I have not run to look at that number.
Okay.
I'm trying to think and do the math based on our last bond proposal, which was a 7.5 cent increase, which equated to $10.50 a month, so it was slightly more than $1 per penny.
Okay.
But I would want to run that information and bring it back to you next time, so I give you the best numbers possible. It's a really good question, very appropriate question. So we are about to jump into our small group activity. we will review 3 initial options created based on community feedback that we've received since the last bond election. Feedback around prioritized needs, around tax impact, around bonding capacity, and around ESSER utilization. I made a really strong effort last Monday to say that the 3 options that we are going to put before you are just initial options. There's not an option that I or Dr. Shepard hopes you choose. These are just 3 initial options to start conversation and see where the group is. Option 1. Option 1 would result in no tax increase. Option 1 would address facility repairs only, some level of facility repairs, funded partly through facility bond and partly through ESSER funding, and potentially include a VATRE. Less work than was a part of the initial proposed bond in May, repairs only, and ultimately a decrease in our INS tax rate, but an increase in our maintenance and operations tax rate by that equivalent amount to offset to where there's no total tax increase. What that does is that option allows the district to do some repairs that were identified as needed, and also allows to move some funding increase to our maintenance and operations, which is the side of our tax rate that allows us to be more competitive with our salaries. We shared feedback that we had received in the Monday meeting. The number 1 highest level of feedback were concerns around teacher pay and around salary competitiveness. So this plan makes an effort to address that concern. Option 2. Option 2 results in a VATRE, some level of VATRE tax increase. It utilizes all of the current INS or debt capacity for bond facility projects, so maintaining the INS tax rate exactly where it is, plus a portion of the ESSER funds on top of that to address facility needs, and a potential VATRE. In this particular option, the INS, or the debt service side, the side that handles construction and facility repair, would remain where it is, and any increase to the total tax rate would be reflective of whatever size VATRE this group was recommending the board consider. Option 3. Option 3 includes a total tax increase. Option 3 keeps the May 2021 bond project scope, but split into multiple propositions. So the May 2021 scope, which we reviewed on Monday, included district-wide facility repairs, about $58 million of facility repairs district-wide. It included building a new Mission Valley campus, a new Stroman campus, and it included new playgrounds for elementaries. Now, that was 1 vote, 1 proposition in May. We've received some feedback about considering breaking that proposition into multiple propositions, potentially a repair proposition, a new Mission Valley, a new Stroman proposition. So the community was voting on individual propositions, and then potentially a VATRE to address salary competitiveness separate from that. So there's the potential in this option that some elements of facility improvement, repairs, a new Mission Valley or a new Stroman, may be voted in favor by the community, while some are not, along with the VATRE, which has to be voted on separately in any of these options. So while it says a total tax increase, that's assuming that the community would vote yes to each of those individual propositions. So in summary, option 1, no total tax increase. A bond that does repairs only, and the INS part of our tax rate goes down. A VATRE to address salary competitiveness, and our M&O rate, maintenance and operation rate, goes up by that equivalent amount so that the total tax rate ends up staying the same. Option 2 is a VATRE increase to the tax rate where the bond does repairs plus additional identified projects where the current INS tax rate stays level to where it is right now, and any total tax rate increase would be from the M&O side of the tax rate on a VATRE. And then option 3, there's an increase on both sides, potentially, depending on how the community would vote on multiple propositions. There you keep the initial bond scope separated into multiple propositions that the community had choice over. Ultimately, a potential increase to the INS tax rate to address those facility upgrades, and a separate VATRE where the M&O rate increases. So both rates increase in option 3, assuming the voters would approve all of the facility-related projects. Mr. Crump, do I have a preference? There's not a Greg plan here, right? Okay. I want to make sure you know there's no plan that we're hoping you say yes to. We want you to work together to tell us what the best plan is moving forward. It may be a version of one of these. It may ultimately be completely different. This is a starting point. So here's what we're going to ask you to do at your tables. We're going to ask you to discuss each of these options. And I'll go back here. We're going to ask you to discuss each of these options. We're going to ask you to select a spokesperson to share which option your group prefers and why. And it may be that in this initial conversation among your group, you don't come to one. It may be that you have some pros about 2 options. That's okay, totally okay. But we want to ask you to select a scribe to capture the reasons on chart paper. So ultimately, we're going to have an option 1 side over here where chart paper is going to go up on the wall after we've presented, an option 2 side, and an option 3 side. Okay? So again, we're discussing each option, selecting a spokesperson from your table to ultimately share out what preferred option you might have and why, or which preferred options. And we're going to ask you to have someone scribe out those pros and cons about that option so that we can maintain that information. Any question about what we're asking you to do? All right, yes, Mr. Baldwin.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Dr. Baldwin. Well, I have just one quick clarification. So in the interest of making sure we're not wasting folks' time, you come prepared with the 3 options that have been discussed as well as built upon from the last bond election proposal. But it's fair to say that if something comes up through these discussions that's totally different, there could be even another option that we should be considering. Is that fair?
Absolutely. We are not limited to what's here. We felt like it would be advantageous to give you sort of 3 different options based on feedback we've received as a starting point to the conversation. Absolutely. And we'll make sure you get chart paper and markers for your scribe. I'm going to ask you to go ahead and go to work, and I'll be walking around to check on you and provide any help I can.
Yeah, they did a lot of.
Well, so starting out here, breaking out options.
I just want to take the whole world, get ready. My question is on that. The repairs that they're looking at, is there any whatever the needs are. Take off the. What they were talking about this thing, that has to do with this, like floors going back.
That aspect of being three options.
Instead of coming down, not looking that way.
But it has to download.
We were moving him and old man. What's the going?
But a lot of that came, a lot of that was.
But I thought I heard him say that you look at the one side and the other side, no, it's absolutely.
With Strowman, basically, more money. But the one that did it, the other ones that.
A lot of the playground stuff, you now see that he even like 70, 80 hours. So that's what that, I think that's a lot of it. That's a lot of
especially if they're young,
Ask devil's advocate, how many times
what's up?
I'm just saying that it was wonderful, except for the security on the gates get closed so that, you know, if the kids can get out, I'm not talking about push them out. But we also have excellent SROs and security guards. I mean, that school is clean. I'm not saying that it's that way now, that's been a lesson. This over here. But even Patty Welder, you know, we don't have a layout. I got the high school, and a practice that I was really doing with those kids like that. Yes. I mean, there's been so much work. I guess what happened? I mean, yes. How fast can they tender downtime run?
This time, how the teacher
If y'all like $6 a month.
Temporarily while they tear down the existing buildings.
But those you, but as a voter, and I'm thinking our other voters can have the same way. It's like, I just told you.
Well, this is that's what they'll have this conversation. Like I
But I mean, one thing, but I know it wasn't going to be
We got to free.
That's part of the well, he decided, there's just a little bit, that's a that's all comes back in. There are some outside. Some of these things like, what's next? We insurance something like that. You know, I'm sure.
Well, but that's the but there was something that was put out, this is where my frustration level comes in with the community. It's option one right, staff here. I want the staff. Or some people are saying, okay, Bishop Valley that's not what I'm saying. What's next?
I need you to promote your
Working on it.
That was another task force.
And I'm telling you, you know, I know all that. And that was a, that he was, he shouldn't have been that. I just don't know how it's going to work. If it's explained, yes, sir. That's an option to staff. I will option to. Option 1 and 2 or
Right now,
So what's option for that?
That was the whole well, the problem is you use
And that's why a lot of that's the size of the money for money you have
if I can just grab everybody's attention for a second. I'm gonna tell you a little bit about me. My preference would not be to raise my voice ever, even in this group, to try to grab your attention. So if you happen to notice the lights flickering on and off, it's me saying it's an old teacher trick of grabbing the group's attention without having to have every teacher yell in their classroom to change activities. I'm not here to change the activity. There is some awesome, deep, rich discussion happening right now. I want to describe to you sort of next steps in the process to encourage you to start putting some thoughts down on paper. I'm a person who really struggles with writing because it gets real when I write it down, and so I'm really slow in that process. That's not a good thing for me. That's actually a bad thing for me. This is an iterative process. I didn't know what that word meant until I went to get my doctorate. And that's that, for those of you who know what it means and have always known. It means that you continue to work on something, right? So it's like a rough draft in English. You know, you're going to write several drafts. That's what this is at first. I'm going to challenge you, and it's okay if you can't do this at this point. I'm going to challenge you to see within your group, is there one that your group has come to say, we don't think this is the right option, but we're really discussing these other two? If there are, I'm going to ask you to start writing a couple of the pros for option whatever and option whatever, just to get some things down on paper to allow us to start to share between groups and hear some of the rationale happening across the room. So that's my challenge to you in the next, let's say, 10 minutes, is to see if we can choose two options, if we can focus on two, if that's possible. If it's not, you can do all three, and write 3 or 4 reasons that those particular options are a strength, and select someone to share that out with the group. This is not the end of this conversation by any means. It's the most critical conversation in our entire process, or one of them. So we're not shutting it down by any means.
God bless you.
School board members will come out, they put a hairnet on, they serve lunch.
So would that be or is that separate money and step goals?
Right, I know, but I'm talking about these regular school days, the kids go home and say, I'm trying to remember what the school draw name, draw name, vote up or down.
We'll share with you.
And before David shares, let me tell you what we're going to do following this. So you're sharing out, you have an opportunity to hear what other conversations have looked like, rationales. Then we're going to ask you to go back and discuss what you heard from the other groups and whether that impacts what you've been thinking in any way. Okay? So I'm going to ask you to share within 3 minutes or less.
We had two options that we agreed on. Option one, where we had for keeping the tax rate the same and allow for M&O. It's more likely to pass due to reduced projects and less money, and it increases the M&O for teacher salary, increases to increases to recruit and retain the teachers. And, well, I agree with those reasons for option one, but I prefer option three, as most of us did here, which Mission Valley and Stroman are unrepairable. I mean, it's very bad to sink money into a sinking ship, basically, what we agreed on. It's an all-encompassing bond to pay for all the fixes throughout the district, and hopefully we can go back to the voters in a few years and be able to build a new school without increasing taxes again. It's the best return on investment, and it adds capacity to Mission Valley and Stroman for the innovation pathways in Mission Valley, because the area is growing. And every year they turn away students as it is now.
Yeah. They all supported the VATRE.
Yes, we support the VATRE unanimously.
Thank you for being the first person willing to share, David. Excellent job. Use up the total 3 minutes, so I will offer very briefly, is there anything any at the table want to add to what David shared from your conversation? No pressure, just want to make sure I open that up.
Well, economic development's a big deal too, that it's going to be hard to attract new families in industry to Victoria unless we can continue to show that we have a good, solid school system. So Stroman and Mission Valley are not going to get that job done.
Thank you, Mr. Clegg. Thank you. I'm going to call you Table 1. Thank you, Table 1. All right, we're going to call you Table 2. Do we have a spokesperson from Table 2? All right, Dale, thank you for being willing to share.
Oh, they're not sticky.
That's usually a good thing.
We've come up with multiple options, but option number one was the political reality option. That the school district needs to get things fixed. We need to have roofs, we need to have air conditioning. Those things have to pass in an upcoming election. Coming off 5 months after a big majority said no. We're trying to change the idea of a bunch of Republicans, and now we're going to vote in November again. Okay? The political reality. But here's the option that we can increase our teacher pay without a tax increase. We can fix our vital air conditioners, roofs at AL around the entire district, throughout at Stroman and the rest of the school district with the amount of money, which is $49 to $54 million of bond money to get that put together. So option one. And then we offer an option number 2 for Mission Valley School. Yes, it'll cost us 3 cents above option 1, but option 1 gets passed, hopefully, probably, because there's no tax increase. Teachers get paid more. And then we offer a second option to rebuild Mission Valley, which gives us 3 years to build up goodwill, which at Monday's meeting of the GOP executive, everyone said, the executive meeting said, we do not trust VISD. We have to rebuild the trust of VISD. If we do this 3 years from now, we come back with a $300 million bond issue that passes. Because we rebuilt Stroman and everything. Because we rebuilt the trust of our taxpayers. That's option number one. With the second option, number two, to build a new Stroman, the 3 cents or so.
Do we get to add?
I'm sorry?
Mission Valley.
Yeah, do you have additional?
Yes, we have other thoughts too. So, and it pains me as a former teacher to use a whole piece of paper for this much writing. This is like $1 worth of paper, guys. I will add Mr. Dale, because I think you had that option 2 for Mission Valley. I think it would be like second proposition.
Second proposition.
Okay.
Second proposition.
So that goes on that sheet, and then there are a good number of us, I'd say probably 50%, so we're split, that do like option 3. We do feel that increasing teacher pay is so very important, but we think we should give the voters some kind of the maximum amount of choice to say what is it that you'd like to see come out of this. One thing that pains me if option 1 worked, and I think it would be great, is down the road, one of the biggest things I saw moving into this community is the idea, we just passed a bond, and it's like, no friends, that was down the road. That was more than a decade ago. And so the idea that, oh, don't worry, we'll just get some trust back, and then we can pass this about Stroman or $300 million in a couple years, I fear that is not true. And so I would hope, I think maybe our other half on the sheet of paper that I kind of wasted, would be very kind of leaning towards option 3, just to give voters the choice. And if they say no, they say no.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, we'll call this table 3.
Okay.
We're split between option 1 and option 2. Option 1 would be no tax increase. The community would support that. The pay increase for the VISD staff. Everybody keeps saying teachers, but technically it's staff is what that covers. The con is that it would be a limited work and doesn't address the majority of the campus needs, even if we stick with option 1. Option 2, with the slight increase, we had additional choices of projects, COVID support, new programs starting at the VISD schools, being the fact that we have, 4 new schools or 4 new programs in our district that need support, because the grants that y'all have received did not cover the maintenance part of it. And option 3, the cons, it was no good. The community's not going to support the tax increase, but they may if they have multiple choices. That's what we came up with.
Thank you very much. Excellent work, table 3. So we'll skip over here to table 4.
We like to call table 8. We chose option number 2. We eliminated option number 3 because of the increase in taxes. We felt that if you're increasing that much, they already passed it. They already rejected it once. They're not going to go for it again. So we eliminated option number 3. We debated a lot between option 1 and 2, and we ultimately decided this time, we're not finished, because we're slower than y'all on that stuff. But we did option number 2, and the reason why we did was because we felt like we need to increase our teacher pay. Because if that's the one thing that we're hearing that needs to be done, we want to make that a priority. I think, and also when you do that, we talked about it, that when you increase the teacher pay, you're also going to get those guys to buy into the system a little bit more, and so that would help maybe pass it. Okay, so we wanted a Vertero increase only that would help us then allow for more needed repairs, because then we could still do our repairs that we need, and then we need to sell it to the public that Texas inputs more into the system when we do the golden penny thing. And I don't think people understand that. I think that's an important aspect of it. If we're putting $40 in and they're putting $60, then we're getting more bang for our buck for our teacher salaries than us trying to generate it ourselves. So.
Thank you very much.
We go 18!
Excellent job. Table 4. And that leaves us with table 5. Mr. Crump.
We didn't settle on any of them. We kind of took your path and put an asterisk next to it. We did option 3 with an asterisk that it gives us the opportunity to kind of change the menu on what's available. One of the comments we had for the cons of option 3 was we're just feeding back to the public a repackaged bond that they rejected, and that can be, the optics of it could be kind of an insult. So looking at option 3, maybe not necessarily having those same scope, but we can change that and ultimately give the voters something like option 2 if they decide not to do Mission Valley or Stroman, whatever that menu looks like, and we can discuss that later. We're definitely for the VATRE for the increases. I think that's been unanimous, and we can get support behind that. That's based off discussions in this room, also community feedback that we received. Let's see, general feedback about what needs to happen regardless of which option. Need more transparency and communication to the public about our maintenance plans. It seems like there's a lot of comments that came back, the issues around why we didn't keep up with stuff. One of the big pros for option 3 is we can take care of the majority of our major repairs and possibly other stuff if the different options get selected with it. So.
Excellent. Thank you very much. As we said, these first 3 options were a starting point. So I want to point out I really like how we had some hybrids occurring. We had some hybrids back here. We had some hybrids here. You're not limited to that starting spot. We are at 7:10. In the next 10 minutes, I want to ask you to just have some internal conversation about what you heard from the other groups who you haven't had the chance to talk with, and see if any of that moves the needle about your thought process individually and collectively. I recognize, one, thank you. When I emailed you, I asked you to not sit by people who were your best friend, who you go to coffee with, who you do this with, and I saw people spread out, and there was a great diversity of thought. So that's represented some in our first report out. We got a complex issue, and we shouldn't all absolutely agree after the first conversation. One thing that we'll do to get a feel for you to have some individual response is we'll put up a wall over here that's option 1 before you leave today, an option 2 wall, an option 3 wall. I don't know, I'll think about maybe we got a couple hybrids coming out here, an option 4 and 5 wall, and ask you to, we're going to give you a little dot and just tell us where you're at right now. Okay, so we're going to do that so I can see individually where you're at as opposed to lumping you all into a collective table. But please take about 10 minutes to talk among yourselves about what you heard from the other groups.
You know what I think kind of has to be a part of the conversation here that may not be necessarily positive or pleasant is that a majority of the people who are casting votes in opposition to the bonds don't necessarily have people.
No, I was sitting over here kind of
But I'm saying,
Pull the dots out.
I'm trying to go. What you said. You know I have
Yeah, and that's what
Yeah, I'd like that. Are they not?
we just, you know, change the font.
Disappointing how many times. So many teacher reasons. They just lack innovation. They don't. And I I'm just saying that I don't know. This is I don't know if anyone yeah, we just well, this one you would have to kind of there's people pretty much, right? When you take that means if they don't vote for it, wow. I think a lot of who saw it. You know what? This is what I don't know. Because you have to explain that Greg explained all this. Greg but that's not our issue.
Oh, y'all gotta go sell that. All righty. Loud whistle, loud whistle.
I would like to share something I've learned tonight. I would like to share something I have learned tonight.
If there are differences among human beings, included among those differences are light sensitivity. Some folks notice light changes much faster than others. Hey, wow. We are nearing 7:30, and we always say we want to honor your time. This is difficult work, and it's not work that we expected to have done within 2 meetings. Okay? Before you leave, and I'm not asking you to get up yet, before you leave, ultimately what I'm going to ask of all of our community members, so I'm going to exclude our leadership team members, administrative leadership team, and I'm going to ask our board members to exclude themselves from this activity, which is before you leave, on your table, there's what looks like a green sheet of paper, but it's actually little dots incognito. And so there's an option 1, an option 2, and an option 3, and I recognize there's some hybrids of those, but if it was option 3, and I'll use this table example, go ahead and vote option 3 tonight if that's your individual desire. I'm sorry? Oh, no, you're not voting on a poster. We just have a generic option 1, 2, and 3 up there for now, so we can see where you individually lie. One thing that I want to say to you is that I'm so appreciative of the way you worked tonight. And I want to make sure that as we recognize that we are not in unison on the best option right now, that that's not a bad thing. We talk a lot in our district about compassionate leadership. And compassionate leadership is based on sharing your pain, sharing your suffering, so that we can work together, find common ground, and move forward. And so we're experiencing that tonight in this process, and that's okay. We may have equivalent green dots on all three of these, and that's all right. That's a starting point for us. We recognize that we're trying to work together in unison, so at the end of this, it's something that this group can feel proud of and own, and it's something our community can feel confident in supporting. But it's a process. Tonight's not the final product. I want to also ask you, there are some things in my mind that you imagine how things will go. You prepare. You have some information. We have some information we didn't cover tonight. That's okay as well. We'll lead off with that when we come forward on Monday of next week. If there's information, Mr. Garrett asked a great question earlier. I'll come back with a more confident answer on Monday for that question. If there are some questions in your mind or information that you haven't seen that you hope to see or feel like you need to see, please just put a bug in my ear before you leave tonight, or email me and say, hey, is there a possibility to share this information? Because that'll give us a little bit of lead time to put some things together if there's something that you feel like you need. You will be seeing cost estimates for repairs for all facilities based on the facility assessment. You will be seeing updated numbers on that. We'll have that to share with you. But if there are other things that you're thinking, hey, it would make a lot of sense if we had this, it would help us, just please let me know. We'll do everything we can to get it for you. This gives you 5 minutes to express yourself via green dot, and a little bit of time to stop by and visit with me if you need. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Can I have your attention for 5 seconds? Thank you so much for being here. It is my job to say that this meeting is officially adjourned.
Thank you.